Well, obviously, much to City of Findlay's unknowingly willingness to acknowledge, we also were flooded out here too in '07. In fact, I remember that morning. In fact, I was still very much involved with Farm Bureau back then, and in fact, had Marv Tuttle up there west of town. He and I was going down to a leadership conference that Farm Bureau was doing that morning, and I got a call from him at 6 a.m. that morning. I think we were meeting like at 6:30, but when you get a call early in the morning, that's probably never good. And Marv called me early, and he says, "Gary, I won't be able to make it today." I says, "What in the world happened?" He says, "Gary, I'm not able to get there." "What do you mean you can't get here?" Because we were living in that big old house, 4 brick thick, and he said, "Gary, there's a flood." "There is?" So I didn't even hear it raining. You just don't hear the weather and stuff inside that brick house. I come out and look at a rain gauge, which is right there at the corner of the house, a 6-inch rain gauge, and it was overflowing. Okay, I says, that's not good. That's not a good sign.
That year, it was probably, I don't know, 1 in the morning, something like that, when we felt that it crested. Okay, the river had crested, and we had moved all the cars either inside this main building in downtown Findlay or on the other side of the main building. And I'm talking 200 new cars and 90 customer cars. And so, the police were out, and, we all felt like it was good. Okay, it was cresting, we're good to go. We've been up for 3 days, just moving cars a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. So I went home.
And so all these tributaries, everything was flooded, but it was all before Findlay got it the worst, because all this water was going to end up going to Findlay. In fact, I remember seeing a message from some, leadership in Findlay saying that early, I think it was like a Tuesday morning, I'm pretty sure it was a Tuesday morning, Bluffton, Genera, Arlington, Mount Blanchard, all these towns on the southern end of the county all flooded badly. That's all these towns have flooded. Findlay's okay. We'll do everything we can do to help these towns. And I'm going, they don't know. It's all going to Findlay. All that water was going to go to Findlay. So at that time, Findlay wasn't flooded, but the next day, Wednesday, it was like a tidal wave coming to Findlay, because all this water ended up going to Findlay.
And got a phone call about 3 that morning, and they said, "We think the water's going up very, very fast." And it was. And for some reason, the water just started going up again. And they said, "Get down here right away." Well, I get a phone call about half an hour later. I was trying to get down here. I couldn't get down here. I live on the east side of town, so I had to go out to the highway and come back around. And I was on my way, and they said, "John, don't bother. You're underwater. There's nothing you can do."
The project with the Corps of Engineers was originally started back in 2006, before the 2007 flood. The city of Findlay and the village of Ottawa, Ohio, approached the Corps of Engineers to see if they could find a solution to the flooding problems both in Findlay and Ottawa. That remained a project between the city of Findlay and the village of Ottawa till 2009, when the Hancock County voters passed a 0.25% sales tax for flood mitigation. And at that point in time, the city of Findlay dropped off as the local project sponsor, and Hancock County Commissioners became the local project sponsor because of the funding mechanism that had been provided by the sales tax.
And they immediately hooked on to the Corps of Engineers, because the Corps of Engineers is a federal agency, and if they were able to make the benefit to cost ratio high enough, in other words, if the benefit was higher than the cost, the federal government would pay for 2/3 of any kind of flood control, flood mitigation structures, anything like that. Well, off that started, and we had all kinds of heavy debates with the Army Corps of Engineers. Their total emphasis was all about Findlay. Very rarely did they ever think about agriculture and farming. We live and breathe drainage because we wouldn't be able to grow any crops. Putting in tidal drainage, maintaining our ditches and creeks and so forth. And so our main position has been, let's do everything we can do to clean and help our present waterways move that water out, because at that time they were very, very choked, a lot of fallen trees, a lot of debris. But for whatever reason, the Corps wanted to do something beyond the river because they didn't think the river was enough. And so that was probably the first main of contention, of differences of opinion and so forth.
The Farm Bureau has a vested interest in the project from the standpoint that most of the projects that are being proposed are in agricultural areas. So they certainly have concerns about how the agricultural properties will be impacted. And we have those same concerns. We know that there's going to be properties that are adversely impacted by the project, and we're cognizant of those concerns, and we're trying to minimize those impacts to the best of our ability.
This benefit to cost ratio ended up not being good enough. And what was interesting to us, they never figured in agriculture into this benefit to cost ratio. They figured homes and businesses and so forth. And all along, it was like agriculture was never hurt. We had millions of dollars worth of damage in our crops, and people had homes that was in the low ground and so forth. And so that was a bone of contention. You know, hey folks, we're out here. You know, agriculture probably contributes $1 billion a year to this county. And that's looking at our annual total cash receipts from all the things that we grow, wheat, corn, soybeans, beef, sheep, hogs, and so forth. And then all the structure that they support that. It's a bigger industry than what most people realize. It's all individual entities. We never get the attention that the Marathons and the Whirlpools and the Coopers, and those are big employers, and I can understandably so. But agriculture still, we call the largest industry of using the resources in this county to produce its industry that there is. So long story short, we always had this battling going back and forth, and we never really accepted what the Corps was doing. They didn't look at the river enough. They didn't figure agriculture into the benefit to cost ratio.
And the urban side of things, as well as the rural side of things, about what's the leadership role. And I think the commissioners going forward with the Conservancy District really need to better assert the process and communicate the process, especially now that we've separated from the Army Corps, because I think it was very easy for elected officials and public officials as a whole, whether it was local, state, or federal, to just defer to the Army Corps. But the Army Corps was probably not best suited for this project, even though the goal of staying with the Army Corps from a process standpoint was the goal of federal funding. And that certainly that didn't evolve into something that was going to be practical for this particular project. And one of the detriments of that was simply the loss of life reality of our project. In meeting with the Army Corps back in 2013, May of 2013, Let Montley, the Undersecretary to the Army Corps, when I asked, take cost benefits off the table, and you heard a lot about that at the recent update, cost benefit. I said, take cost benefit off the table. When you rack and stack projects, what's the number one thing that Congress is going to look at towards funding? And he said, oh, easy, Brian, loss of life. And that was the first time I heard that. And so when I came back in 2013 in May, you know, the process side of me said, we have a very slim chance of getting federal funding.
That's when things got into a tailspin. That's when they decided to figure out to get another opinion. That's when they went to Stantec and started that whole process. But more money. They had already spent $10 million with the Corps to have a project that in the end really wasn't acceptable. And then I think they spent another 1.2 with Stantec.
And so to now be in a mode where we're away from the Army Corps and looking at it from more of a private sector engineering project, I think is a good thing for the community. But again, the board as a whole has got to take the reins in conjunction with the Conservancy District and do a better job of facilitating.
But at least Stantec, to our feelings, at least the river enhancement part was a really, really good option that we've been talking about and promoting all along. The other options that they had were probably not as desirable.